Amanda, and I'm here to tell you that you're listening to the Decarbonisation Dialogue, a podcast from Salix.
Welcome to the Decarbonisation Dialogue. Welcome to delivering on climate change, our collective challenge. I am Hannah Walker, and I believe that the best way to communicate a message is by being passionate about what you are talking about. Through that passion, I believe you take people with you and create action using your influence to make change and make a difference. Our task today is to get all of us to net zero. Thank you very much to Paul Bushnell for being my guest today. Paul is Environmental and Energy Manager at the University of York. Paul has many years of experience managing estates and manufacturing. He is currently handling the hugely ambitious geothermal project at the University of York. The university has launched a landmark geothermal project that aims to cut fossil fuel use across the campus and spearhead the city's net zero ambitions. The project is backed by 35 million in funding from the Department for Energy Security Net Zero and aims to harness the Earth's natural heat to decarbonise the campus while also providing invaluable research and educational opportunities. The initial 3-year phase will focus on developing a sustainable heat source to supply the majority of the university's buildings, significantly reducing its reliance on fossil fuels. But don't worry if you're not an engineer, because I am certainly not an engineer or a scientist, because Paul is going to talk to us today about all things geothermal. So welcome to Paul.
Hi, Hannah. Thank you for having me.
Let's talk a little bit about your own background before we start to talk about this very ambitious project. You studied at the University of Cambridge. Over the years, you have specialised in site management, facilities management, organisational change, engineering, and much more. What inspires you? Is it the engineering, the science, or the management of it all?
So background-wise, I'm a physicist from trade, so into the science and all that. But I always knew I'd be involved in engineering. So in background to my career, I was very fortunate that I gained an engineering sponsorship with ICI, who was the bellwether of British industry at the time. Some of that makes me think how lucky I was, and a little bit about how difficult it is for people today to fund themselves through engineering and through the STEM subjects and other applied sciences. I guess with that career, it gave me a good engineering background, but above all else, a good way of working with people, the maintenance teams, the shop floors, the people who kind of get things done. And during that time, I progressed on to doing larger projects and really found all that really quite interesting. Just doing something different, doing something that's a bit of a change. Did that both in the UK and worked for a German multinational for a period of time, and maybe a bit strange in the net zero agenda, but worked in the chemical industry, the food industry, quite varied there. If it comes down to the question, what makes you tick? That's the kind of theme in the question. I don't think it's one particular thing that strikes out. I like getting things done. I hate things not progressing. I hate talking about things without getting things done, without actually making it happen. And I think that's both the equipment side of things, probably more importantly, the people side of things. If you think to the decarbonisation agenda, sometimes we just need to get on. Sometimes we need to make those steps, whether they're small or larger steps. We need to find solutions.
Mm-hmm. So now is certainly the time for action, isn't it? We have, we do a lot of talking. And I figured looking at your CV that, it says getting things done. That came to my mind, which is why I said, is it just getting things done? You are definitely a just getting things done person. Now, before we talk about getting things done at the University of York, and particularly in relation to this geothermal project, can you tell me a little bit about, because not everybody will know York, can you tell me a little bit about the university and the community in York? What's it kind of like to live and work there?
Well, the university is a fantastic place in a great city. There's no two ways about it. So York's a fantastic place. The university in itself, one thing that's really good about it is it really wants to be part of this community. It wants to be part of York. It's got a very public desire to be a university for the public good, and it really takes that into its heart. For us as a family, York's great. It's a real hidden gem. It's got that blend of being a city, but with a bit of a village feel at the same time. So it's got the bells and whistles you want, but it still is a community.
And that's really important, isn't it? That community, when we talk about the geothermal project, because you talk about that nice kind of warmth and the sense of community that people have. It's a fantastic city, wonderful businesses, and of course you've got the university. In terms of the bigger picture, you're now finding yourselves at the centre of quite a vast project, which is where the science and the engineering comes from. Because you've talked about engineering, you've talked about your background. You are now finding your work at the University of York is becoming, here we are today talking about geothermal, which I don't know very much about. So I would like to know today is, what is geothermal and why are we talking about it in relation to York?
In very simple terms, geothermal is harnessing naturally occurring heat under the surface of the earth. It's as simple as that. There's a few different ways to do it. In our case, what we're trying to do is access a deep-lying reservoir of hot water, basically, about 4 kilometres below the Earth's surface, naturally heated by the natural heat of the Earth. Bring it up to the surface in a big pipe, in very simple terms. Take out the heat, extract the heat, and then return it basically untouched back to the Earth, just slightly cooler, where it will just naturally warm up again. In that process, the aim of any geothermal schemes is to take out that heat, in many cases to warm people's homes, in our case to warm up buildings within the university. And even better in some schemes, if the temperature is sufficient, if the flow is sufficient, then that hot water can be used to generate electricity as well. So it can provide heat potentially. In some cases, it can provide electricity as well.
Now, it's not a new form of energy, is it? Can you tell me, and I do want to focus on York, but where else has this been done successfully? Where else in the world?
There's lots of big players who've been doing it. The United States are very big in geothermal energy. Places like Turkey in Europe, it's very, very popular in. That we're going out inquiring for drilling rigs, and the size of rigs we've got, they're all over the world. Some Argentina, various places. So I think one of the things from a UK perspective are we're falling a little bit behind our peers. In Germany, Netherlands. Everybody's really recognising it as a very valuable source of the energy mix going forward.
If we're falling slightly behind, you've just talked about how we're drilling deep down. How many kilometres did you say we're drilling for York?
We haven't fully defined our target yet, but we're aiming somewhere between 4 and 5 kilometres down. So what we're trying to do, which has been done in like the Netherlands earlier, is targeting a layer that's known as the early Carboniferous limestone. And many people know about aquifers where they might get the drinking water from. That's quite common source. And basically, there's a strong understanding that this Carboniferous limestone has a high potential for having a similar water source, but much further below the surface, and therefore is much hotter.
We're drilling down. It takes me back to that kind of, when you talk about we're behind, you're drilling down in a bid to reduce our carbon emissions because we're looking for cleaner energy, which is why we're involved at Salix in terms of the public sector decarbonisation scheme. And a lot of that funding you've managed to receive through that scheme. But does that mean if we're behind that we are lacking or we're now going to have to go out and find the right skills and the equipment? We don't just have these drills. We don't just have this equipment ready to go down deep into the surface. So how's that going to work logistically in terms of the equipment required and the skills?
I guess there's two things there. There's one, if you break it down in simple terms, we're drilling a hole. That's been done for many, many decades now in the oil and gas industry. So while some extent what we're targeting for a source of energy is different, the techniques of actually getting there are actually very well understood, and there's a lot of skills in the marketplace that are used to doing that. are used to drilling holes, but it's just for a slightly different purpose. We have to remember we have got deep wells already in the UK, particularly down in Cornwall. So we've got projects in there. So there's a range of expertise we can tap in from there. We've got leading scientists in places like the British Geological Survey who really understand the geology and are really world renowned. And whilst we're a bit behind, the UK is in a great position, and particularly projects like this one are supported to actually catch up and actually come on the forefront of it, because we do have a lot of skills in our country, and we forget that. As far as equipment goes, whilst there's plenty of companies in the UK who do drilling and work, and we don't know who we'll be using yet. We're going through a procurement exercise, but the equipment goes where the need is. If the needs and the investments are doing geothermal and onshore drilling in other countries, that's where the equipment is. But it can be shipped around, it can be brought back, and as I say, a lot of the experience there is a lot of the experience actually in the UK.
It is quite it's a visionary project, isn't it? And as you say, what better place really than York when you are already doing huge amounts of research? I mean, you've got incredible people sitting right at the university, and obviously you'll be tapping into the experts at other universities and other research institutes across the country for this project, presumably helping shape this vision. But in terms of the actual project, you've got you're a university, you've got a fantastic site there, one of the world's leading universities, and you've also obviously got a huge population there. You've got local people. How are you kind of engaging with the local community, and how is this project going to impact? Because you're looking at creating an energy source, not just for the university, but actually and you'll have to talk to me about timescales, but in 4 or 5 years, presumably that energy will be shared largely with a large part of the city. So there's going to be a huge benefit from this project to that community. At this moment in time, what does this project mean for local people?
Where we are at the moment, Hannah, we've got funding for the first stage of the project. So as you say, we've got huge ambitions, and that first phase of the project's purely focused on providing heat for the university itself. We're speaking with the Combined Authority, City of York Council, other stakeholders, and we definitely have a hope and dream to be able to provide energy outside of the university if we can. And that really depends on the success of the first project, what we've got for funding, how we give the research, how the research works as well, and how we can give out that knowledge further. I think one of the big beauties of geothermal schemes, if we look at impact on the local community, is once they're complete, there's not a lot on the surface. There's a massive investment, but when you come to see it, most of the investment's under the ground. It's hidden. So we're in the process of looking towards going through planning, etc. for it. But for the initial assessments we'll have very little negative impact or impact from a negative sense on the local community, and we're always aware of that. We're a campus university, but there are people who live around the vicinity. But the engagement's key, and as you say, people don't really know a lot about geothermal as a whole. They don't know about a lot of the a lot about the technology, and we're trying really, really hard as a team to give out as much information as we can. We've got a lot of information on our website. If you go to the University of York website and type in geothermal, there's a lot of information about the project. We've been carrying out events like we've been speaking, we have a Good Neighbours event where we invite people from the local community just to chat about any issues that they've got, which we've already presented what we're doing there. We've had one of the first of a whole set of range of open days around the project, where we really want to welcome people on site, give them contact to the people who are doing the work, who are involved in the project, get them to speak with the people who are implementing the work, and just give out that information and just to share and have that open dialogue. And that seems to be working really well at the moment. We're keen on that as well, because if we see our project as a way to unlock, hopefully, geothermal a bit more in the UK. And part of that whole piece is to understand that public engagement, to understand that public acceptance, to understand the best way of going about projects and keep people informed. And that's really, really exciting.
It is. And I have to say, I've spent quite a bit of time looking at that website area, and it is a superb geothermal website area. It's full of really basic questions and answers, as well as, information that is very easily accessible, in my view. So that's a real asset and a real tool that obviously people can tap into. You mentioned that most of the work is obviously going on under the ground. Now, I'm fortunate enough through my work with Salix and through the Department for Energy Security Net Zero to go on site visits. So I visit a lot of the hospitals, the colleges, the universities, schools, etc., that we work with to deliver energy efficiency schemes. And they're delivering a range of projects. So whether it's air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, and even on a kind of smaller scale, I appreciate that you're working on, this major project, 35 million, and it's a big project and it's years to go. But one of the challenges that people express time and time again is that space. Is that kind of lack of space that a lot of particularly schools have, or even hospitals, and having to navigate around working sites as well. Hospitals, for example, 24/7, 365 days of a year. School, very tight deadlines, as universities have. You can't not begin the term in September when the students come back. Tell me a little bit about that area, and presumably there's a lot of initial equipment used, but once that work is finished, what you're saying is once the drilling is finished and once you've reached that energy source, that clean energy source, everything gets covered up and presumably full access to that kind of space. But in the meantime, how does that work? What kind of space are you taking up logistically? And is there going to have to be a lot of movement in the university and shifting things around and the way people work during that initial period?
Not a great deal if everything goes to plan. So we've got a proposed site. We've still got some bits of work to do before we can confirm that. We're very fortunate in the fact that we're a campus university. We're over quite a lot of land, So we have got some space to manoeuvre, but some areas of the campus lean better towards a solution to others. We've already commenced dialogues to think about what might come after. So I think it's really, really important that if you've got any project, it's a wholesome project that goes from all the way from beginning to end. So we're actually looking at the design of the site to include both what we need for the drilling, which we'll have a pretty enormous drilling rig for about a year on campus, to what we will leave as a site or as a legacy after we've completed that. And we're working quite hard. We can't confirm exactly what we'll do yet, but we're working quite hard to do that in such a way that provides something for the community, something that's fitting around where we place the site. We're really keen to think about that all the way through. Logistically, obviously, there's things like we've got 5 kilometres of pipe to store somewhere and so on. So I think one of the things that we'll be keen to understand is how the projects like this can be done in more confined spaces. Because background-wise from engineering, there's a lot of users in the country who have district heating plants already. They already have district heating networks already. A lot of people have combined heat and power plants just like we do that burn gas, produce electricity, and the waste heat gets used to heat their buildings, whether that's a hospital, a university campus, or even a town. And we've got a little bit of a dream that if we can unlock this, the beauty of it potentially is to give a bit of a drop-in replacement for combined heat and power plants. And at the moment, that's really difficult. We found it really difficult as a university because there's not really many solutions when you need a lot of heat. There's heat pumps, of course, but they do require a lot of power. They require a lot of energy. They cost quite a lot of money to run. And some places they work really well. In other places, it's really hard to get that electricity supply. So we really want to go through and understand how the technology can be used more widespread once we've completed our job.
Going back to the community, because one of the things I pick up as well when I go on site visits is the challenges and the solutions. When I'm going back to this drilling, certainly with the work at schools, there's a huge amount of excitement. And I appreciate this is a huge project, but there's a huge amount of excitement from the users of the site. So, for example, school children. And we've talked about skills, and I know we've got skills, and sometimes it's about retraining and upskilling, because we've got a huge amount of potential and skills already that exist. But we're also looking at skills for the future and future generations. So how will there be opportunities for the kids, for example, school children, to come and look at this drilling and be part of that excitement, if you like, of this project?
We've got every intention to do that. Every intention. We are very early on in the process. So we've not engaged all our contractors and all our partners, but we're speaking with or engaging with people with the view that we'll be doing work like that. We'll be doing work with local communities, local schools if we can, because we really want to inspire the next generation. We're looking about how we can use what we've got on the campus as part of our teaching, potentially. So we've got new courses that we're running at the university. For example, there's a new MSc in renewable energy technologies, and one of the dialogues we're having is how can we use what we've got on campus to educate that, to show what we've got. And there's little things that even just doing the project has triggered, so some of the dialogue with the local community, it's triggered us into doing regular tours of what we've got for existing energy centres with our students, with our students at the university. And we've got outreach teams that, as I say, we've planned fully to see what we can offer.
Great, because I can see that there's a genuine curiosity about all things energy. And of course, we've all got to think again about how we use our energy, how we consume our energy, looking at clean energy. But just in terms of the technicalities and having that vision, it's a great opportunity, isn't it? Particularly for that kind of younger generation to be part of that and have it on their doorstep and to think about climate change, because there's undoubtedly we're facing massive challenges. When we're talking climate change, inequality, we're talking pandemics, resource pressures, all of that. Do you think geothermal has definitely got to be a part of that long-term solution?
Absolutely, in my mind, and it is in many countries. It is in many countries already. If we've got. I think the big barrier to geothermal projects has been it's very capital intensive up front with risk, which hasn't really been de-risked. There just hasn't been enough projects up to now to fully de-risk and understand the situation. But the flip side of it is, once we've had that capital investment, the operational costs are really low for geothermal schemes. They really are. A working geothermal scheme is really cost effective. Because you've got heat, you've got no fuel you're burning. It's in very simple terms, or very little fuel you're burning. It is a technology where there's different ways to get it to work at different scales, at different temperatures. The beauty of it is it's a great form for baseload energy. It's one of the forms of energy. It works when the wind ain't blowing and the sun ain't shining.
It's a constant, and it's there. It's coming from the ground. It's there. But you mentioned the word risk. Of course, it's something that we need to talk about. When you talk about risk in this context, what kind of risk are you talking about in terms of geothermal?
From geothermal sources, particularly the deeper you go, the knowledge of the underlying geology and what aquifer sources or what sources there are has got uncertainty in it. And we're doing a lot of work to reduce that uncertainty, like we're doing a really fancy 3D seismic survey to give us a good picture of the earth below us to target things correctly. But there is a fact that until you've drilled the well, you don't fully know what you're going to get from it performance-wise, until there's more wells and it's very similar and you've done one before and all that. There's some uncertainty there. And that is certainly been a barrier to schemes.
Mm-hmm.
We're very fortunate in the scheme we've put together in York is it's not just the geothermal scheme we're doing. We've got a combination of things we're doing. We're extending our district heating system to a number of other buildings. We're doing building insulation. We're doing lighting upgrades. So we're doing a whole package of works that pretty much give a guaranteed carbon benefit with or without the geothermal. Because we've got an existing system and an existing system that we own and operate, we've got a degree of options we can take. So with the beans, if we get a different type of well performance, there's options to reconfigure the system in different ways.
So there's a chance to change and adapt as you go along, dependent on that risk. When you mention the uncertainties, when do you think those initial uncertainties start to not become so important?
There's steps along the process where risk gets reduced. Our first big step is the completion of our 3D seismic survey data and the analysis of that, which we're using really the best experts we can get hold of to look at. That will inform our choices much better, and that'll be in the beginning of next year. All that work will be complete. We will get a better understanding of what all the options are as we commence drilling in about 18 months' time, something like that, maybe slightly longer, because we're very keen to survey everything on the way down, because you think we're going for a target 4 or 5 kilometres below the Earth's surface, but it gives us a fantastic opportunity to see everything all the way down there. There's many layers that are potential geothermal sources. There's other schemes within Salix grants at the moment. They're targeting shallower geothermal sources. They can all give a solution. We've obviously got on our eyes a big prize. The truth of the matter is, until we've drilled down and drilled the first well, we intended to drill 2 wells as part of this phase, but until we've drilled the first well, the performance won't be fully known.
How has this project changed the way that you work? Because this is clearly your main focus. Has it changed your job? I mean, did you envisage you'd be doing geothermal when you began at York?
Well, the simple answer is to no. I think plans and opportunities and what you do depends on the facts in front of you. It depends what you found, so if you look at the geothermal, we're keen to look at that as one of a range of options, but it was only when we got the preliminary geological information, when we did the detailed assessment, that it said, well, actually, this is a really viable option and a really UK national significance kind of project to do. So no, there wasn't a vision you'd be doing that. But I think a lot of people in the engineering kind of area are used to that. You do different things, different days, you do different projects, you do different styles of things. And for that, it doesn't mean you don't really change your way of working. It doesn't really change that. The project's obviously made me and a whole part of the team significantly busier. There's a lot more to do. And the public engagement side of things is a greater part of the activities we're carrying out than if you maybe look at like a year back, but that's part of the fun, isn't it? That's part of the...
It's part of it. I suppose it's part of creating, trying to create a better future and looking at energy. We've all got to look for solutions, and you're certainly leading the way on such a huge project. And so we're really fascinated to be working with you and following the geothermal project at the University of York. Thank you very much to Paul for sharing your time and taking up this time with us today, and sharing your knowledge on all things geothermal at the University of York. There can be no doubt that climate change is the biggest challenge of our time. Today, we must reduce greenhouse gas emissions to slow global warming. Today, we must act for tomorrow, adjusting our lifestyles to current and future impacts of climate change. Today, we must use our collective wisdom to deliver on our climate commitments. Today, we work for tomorrow's world. Please don't forget to subscribe to our podcast channels, and please tell us what you think by emailing us at podcast@salixfinance.co.uk. We'd love to hear your ideas. Thank you very much to Paul for joining us today.
Thank you.
I'm Charles Begg, and I'm here to tell you that you've been listening to the Decarbonisation Dialogue, a podcast from Salix. For more information about our work and to find more content, please visit salixfinance.co.uk/podcasts.